welcome to Heel Heat. This is our WWE show for the week. My name is George Coles, and let's jump right into it. First off, we had Randy Orton coming out to the ring, which brought up Brad Maddox, Kane, and Vicky Guerrero, basically saying that Steph and Trips aren't going to be there this week. They talk about who's in charge. Ultimately, Vicky makes a decision to put Randy Orton in a match against the Rhodes brothers, handicap match, which is the theme of the show. What words? They're easy to say. Rhodes brothers pick up the win when the Big Show gets involved, hits the choke slam from off the steps through the announce table. Okay opener, good little thing. I don't know what the purpose of having a heel faction putting another heel in this kind of a match is. It doesn't really make sense, but I digress. Speaking of something that doesn't make sense, Los Matadors team up with Santino Marella versus the Union Jacks, aka 3MB. I actually thought this was a pretty solid match. I could have lived without Santino having the bull horns on the Cobra and wearing the bull horns too. I mean, it wasn't bad, wasn't good. It was just on our show. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm sick of seeing Los Matadors versus 3MB in any combination, and that rings true here. It didn't bother me as some of their other matches, but it did still. It's like, what are you doing? What are you going to do with this team? Speaking of some people I'm not sure what they're doing with, we had Damien Sandow versus Kofi Kingston. Sandow gets a pretty decent win, pretty solid. I think they're going to, based off of the match he had a few weeks ago with John Cena, I think going forward, they're going to make Damien Sandow a more serious character, and seeing how much that the fans got behind him. Now, if he could take the ball and run with it, is going to be up to him. Speaking of a guy that was given the ball but never really given a chance, Dolph Ziggler versus Curtis Axel. Axel picks up the win, surprisingly. I figured Ziggler would win, get the belt off of Axel. He's kind of treading water as the champion, but this is what they went with. I don't think they know what to do with Dolph Ziggler right now. I think he's kind of a guy that's lost in the shuffle, and it's a shame because he's one of the most supremely talented guys on the roster. But anyway, sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. Sometimes they don't have anything for you. Next up, we have Tamina versus Nikki Bella. AJ and Brie both get involved. Tamina picks up the win. I think Nikki is the worst of the two Bella sisters. Tamina is actually a very decent wrestler. But this division is so hard to care about the wrestlers in the Divas division when pretty much the only one that's been on your show constantly is AJ Lee, and the others have come and gone, and the pushes seem to be based off their popularity on Total Divas. Well, you know, it is what it is. Next up, we had the segment, and I'm going to mash all of these together, the Backstage Orton segments, the ones he had with the three authority figures, Kane basically saying that, you know, watch how you're talking, or Big Show will be the least of your worries. However, I think it's weird that no one feared Kane when they were overruling him, when really he's the big red machine. He's been booked for 15 years as an unstoppable monster. But the best one I thought was when the Shield were in there and he was questioning them, and they said, we don't work for you. We don't work for Kane. We don't work for Vicky. We don't work for Brad Maddox. We work for Hunter and Steph. I kind of thought it was cool to let them know the pecking order that, hey, you can talk all you want, but we don't care because you're not the one paying our check. I thought it was interesting, gave the Shield back some of the heat that's been coming off of them for being associated with this and being nothing more than not mercenaries anymore, but corporate sellouts, basically, for lack of a better term. Now, speaking of sellout, A guy that, if you listen to the crowd reaction, should have sold out the arena. Fandango wrestled the returning Tyson Kidd. Looks like it's an angle they're building off of Total Divas again. Solid match. Fandango picks up the win somewhat surprisingly. I think that they're going to drag this feud into SummerSlam, Survivor Series, with Kidd getting his comeuppance there. I really think that if given the proper time, this could be one of the matches that steals a Survivor Series show, if this is the route they go with. Now, speaking of routes they go with, we're going to see some of the routes our friends out there, and also I went with. Our question of the week from last week was, who was your favorite WWE tag team? And if you remember, I prefaced it by saying just their WWE runs. Now before we get into mine, we're going to get into some opinions from our friends. The first is from Jacob Bradley, 67, the Rockers of the Heart Foundation. Two solid teams, had a solid feud with each other. Next is Mike Kirwan. My favorite tag team of all time is the Hardys. Next, our friend Lord Bogglesworth. The greatest tag team in WWE history has got to be Edge and Christian. Their hilarious segments and charisma, coupled with amazing in-ring ability, cement them as the best. He also went on to say, without a doubt, the best tag team in WWE's history is Edge and Christian. Their charisma as well as their amazing ring talent cement them as my favorite tag team of all time, which basically the same thing. I think he wanted to change his comment, but we'll put him in because I don't know which one he really wanted to go with. Either way, good opinion there, Lord Bogglesworth. And next is from our friend Sonic Rules 94. Rock and Sock is one to say because I'm a huge rock mark, but I'll go with the Dudley Boys. The Dudley Boys are near and dear to my heart. They're my favorite tag team of all time. However, I think most of their fame and popularity is based off of their ECW run. They did have a tremendous amount of success in the WWE. I'm going to go with a team that, I was talking about this with a friend of mine, Laura Lyons, the lovely Laura from IWX show. The team I want to talk about is one that I think kind of is a dividing force. A lot of old school NWA, WCW fans don't like them. A lot of people that grew up with WWF/WWE do like them. And that's Demolition. They came in, and even I myself thought they're just another Road Warrior ripoff team, which there were tons. Every federation had their Road Warriors or a similar gimmick. Guys like Powers of Pain, like Demolition, and tons of others that didn't really go far at all. But to me, Demolition carved their own niche and became their own thing and dominated in the WWE ranks. So much so that the dream match became them versus the Road Warriors. So for that, and the fact of, at the time that I was, only a wrestling fan for a few years, how dominating Demolition was really always stuck with me. As honorable mention to the Brainbusters, they probably would be the greatest WWE tag team of all time if they spent more than 2 years in the WWE. But the Dudleys, I can't argue that. I can't really argue any of these guys' opinions because they're all really great opinions. My personal opinion is it's Demolition now. Now, coming off of that, a similar concept for the question of the week for this week. Who's been the best WWE U.S. champion? Now remember, we're just talking about WWE, so guys that like Wahoo McDaniel and Dusty Rhodes, not in this picture. Ever since the WWE's taken over the title, who's been the best person to hold it? Let us know what you think. Hit us up on our Twitter, hit us up on our Facebook, put it down where? Down in the comments. Next up, we have another one of our many handicap matches of the night. John Cena versus the Real Americans. The Americans, the fans wanted to see the giant swing on Cena. I wanted to see the giant swing on Cena. It was teased before Cena super Cena'd up. I like the effort that Cena put through in this match. He showed some different wrinkles, different moves, a little bit of a different style to him. Kind of proving, and it's something that they did on WWE.com, that he has more than just the normal 5 moves of doom. I thought this match was actually good, and the Real Americans came over strong. Alberto Del Rio, of course, tried to attack afterwards. Big E Langston came out and made the save, thus furthering his face career. I must say, I really actually enjoyed this. Next up, we had a match with Ryback versus R-Truth. R-Truth gets a surprising win by a roll-up, probably setting up a storyline going forward. Something that happens later is kind of foreshadowed with this. Now, our next match is set up from a few matches before. We got Big E Langston versus Alberto Del Rio. If you watch the show a few months back, I thought their matches when Del Rio was face and Big E was heel with Ziggler were actually really good and really opened my eyes to how good Big E Langston could be. I don't think this one quite lived up to that lofty of a standard. Del Rio wins with the cross arm breaker. I think they could have held out on him beating him or used somebody else. I think Big E needs to be elevated a little more. I see some really great things for the guy. Again, I don't think it's as good as their other matches, but by far wasn't a horrible match. Next up, we have Curtis Axel and Paul Heyman. Talking about being Paul Heyman guys. Ryback's not a Paul Heyman guy. They run down CM Punk, which of course brings out Punk. Punk attacks Axel, gets to Heyman, starts whacking him again with the cane. Almost spilled the beans on what I was thinking right then. At some point, don't you think with the Singapore cane or the kendo stick, whatever you call it, it's the same weapon, that Paul Heyman has to bring in the Sandman? It's such a natural thing with what's going on that it has to happen at some point as a hired gun or something. But the biggest thing to come out of it is Ryback's officially dropped as a Heyman guy, said that he never accepted and never was. So therefore, I think that's the biggest move coming out of it. I'd like to see Paul go on and maybe get paired up with some other guys. I think him and Axel, it's not bad. He's doing more for Axel than I think Axel could have done on his own. Axel's character is a little stale. I'd like to see him maybe go and attach himself to a Damian Sandow, someone that's on the rise. You know, someone that just needs that little oomph. Maybe Wade Barrett, someone that's long been rumored to be a Paul Heyman guy. A returning wrestler like maybe a Mason Ryan. Someone of that nature I'd like to see Paul get attached to, that he can help go to the next level. Speaking of next level, we had our main event match. CM Punk and Daniel Bryan versus The Shield, which ends with the Wyatts coming to attack, which we had a really cool segment standoff for a little bit. The Shield and the Wyatts were going at each other before realizing they have a common enemy. They go after Punk and Bryan, which brings out their Usos and the Rhodes brothers to run them off. Faces stand tall in the ring, heels are cowering, going to the back. But all in all, I honestly think this was a very subpar show, and I'm going to go right into my ratings, and I think it'll reflect it with the ratings. Now, we have a rating system. It's 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a Great Khali, 2's a Heath Slater, 3's a Randy Orton, 4's a CM Punk, and 5 is a Daniel Bryan. I'm giving this a 1, a Great Khali. The end match could have been something really special. It wasn't. Most of the matches on the night were passable at best. A lot of the matches on any other card would have been the worst match on a card. The best match on this Monday Night Raw could have been the worst match on most Monday Night Raws. And that's part of the problem. I know that the being taped 5 or 6 hours beforehand, I know there's jet lag, I know all that. But it just didn't hold my interest. And it really was a bad show, in my opinion. But before I go, we talked about my friend a bit earlier. We're going to talk about her again. Laura Lyons, this is for you. You're going to be probably one of the only two people that understand what this is, because I'm not going to explain it. If other people get it, that's it. But this is just for you, Laura. And I expect to see you comment right down in these comments, like we talked about, when you hear this. You know, I have pictures. I have pictures of all my boys. But the one I can't have a picture of my Gino. It just hurts me. It hurts me to see his picture even. Laura, that was for you. Hopefully you understand. Hopefully it comes over well. Anybody else that gets it, feel free to comment, because it's an impression from something that happened. It is wrestling related, but that was for Laura Lyons. I held up my part. I expect to see my comment. But anyway, basically that's all I have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been Heel Heat.